Welcome to the CAIO podcast, the Chief AI Officers podcast, where we talk to leaders who are implementing enterprise AI. We talk to them because we learn from their challenges and their opportunities. Their peers learn from them. We also have them inspire others who want to follow in their footsteps, but we also give them an opportunity to talk to the talent who can come and work for them, because we want to democratize talent. If everyone ends up in these 7 hyperscalers, then we won't have AI getting its true shake. Today, we are really thrilled to have Kunal Anand with us. Kunal is the CTO of F5. He's also been at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. We'll find out a little bit about that at BBC. So he's had a tremendous career. He's an expert in cyber, in engineering, and leadership. Kunal, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's a delight to be here with you and the team.
Awesome. Kunal, for our listeners, we have a global audience. Just give them a brief as to what F5 is. It's not the auto racing. And what is your role in F5?
Definitely not auto racing. F5, we are so focused on application delivery and security. What that means in practicality is for organizations that need to do things like load balancing, multi-cloud networking, web application and API protection, and now enterprise AI capabilities, which could include things around acceleration, delivery, even security use cases related to AI. We are that organization for providing those capabilities today.
And your role at F5?
So I joined F5 about 6 months ago, and my role at F5 has been around, my official title is Chief Technology and AI Officer. The AI part is relatively new in the last couple of months, and it's been an amazing journey over the last half year now.
Awesome. So Kunal, you said a few things which I have a lot of follow-on questions, but before that, you had an amazing journey of working in some cool places, building cool companies, getting bought out, etc. So just briefly tell our audiences why they all want to grow up to be you.
I don't know if you want to grow up to be me, but I'll tell you my journey. My background, I grew up watching the dot-com boom, and I was just so inspired, and I always thought that one day I'm going to be over there. And, I went to school. I actually studied business. I studied quantitative finance and economics. I graduated, and you would think that the logical place for someone like me would be a bank, but I taught myself how to program. And, my now wife, then girlfriend, would drop me off at the bookstore close to our college, and I would just sit there on the floor transcribing source code on one of those yellow notebooks. I would come back to the computer lab, download the C compiler, and try to write source code from what I had already written down. So I taught myself how to program. My first job out of college was NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and I learned a lot there. From there on, I worked at MySpace, a social networking platform.
Of course.
And I left when we were a little more than 200 million users, which at the time was a pretty large number in 2008, 2009. And thereafter, been all over, in terms of starting up companies. I've worked at the BBC in a role as a director of technology and doing some really fun projects at scale. And about in 2013, I started my own company that was acquired by Imperva in 2018, and been through the private equity journey. Was able to get Imperva through that whole process with a great team around me, a great set of supporters on the private equity side, Thoma Bravo. And that was an incredible journey. And F5 reached out to me at the end of last year and really had a good set of discussions with them. And I'm really excited about the work that we're doing here now. So it's been this wild, weird, crazy journey, but a journey that's been inspired by solving hard problems and not being afraid to change industries, change roles, from building to consuming products. I think it's important to have a multitude of history, and I think it's important for everybody to try lots of different things and then figure out what works well for them.
So do you think, Kunal, that you've kind of done so many things, and one of the questions one would ask is, when you were doing the scribbling of source code, why the hell didn't you get a computer science degree? But that's a whole separate issue. But you worn so many different hats. Does that kind of help you in your current job? This is again for our listeners.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll start by saying this, which is I came up from, look, I don't have a CS degree. And what's I hopefully inspiring to the listeners is that, we all come from different backgrounds. We all come from and study different things. For me, I think it's important, and I should hopefully send a signal that if you aspire to learn something and do something, it's all achievable. When I was coming up, Google did not exist. There's no way for me to go and index or search the world's index and get access to all of this stuff. I think for people today, there's so much technology and we all have so many advantages now compared to what I had to face more than 25 years ago. And it's wild and incredible. I think it's important to try lots of things. It's important to stay humble. There is no task, there is no job that is low level for me. Frankly, some of my best experiences were as I was building technology, writing source code, and then trying to fix that source code. You versus the machine, you versus the debugger, and knowing that you're going to get to the other side. And there's a beauty in that is just so wonderful. So yeah, I think that skill set plus others have contributed to my ability to work at this scale and across different disciplines. So I think it's important for people to try lots of different things.
Try different things, be humble. I think, Kunal, you said it so very well. Kunal, shifting to a little bit about FI, I was at an event where Ann Neuberger, who is the Deputy National Security Administrator in the US, said that AI is the biggest opportunity for cybersecurity, but also the biggest danger for cybersecurity. In your critical role that you have, what are your thoughts about what you said? Do you think that is true?
I think, well, I'll start with this, which is, I think right now there's a lot of interesting technology that we have today in AI. I think right now this is evolving at such an insane pace, at an insane rate. But I also think that, like any type of technology, you can do good things with it and you can do bad things with it, right? So prior to AI, as an example, we were facing this dilemma of bad bots on the internet, right? Automated traffic that was doing credential stuffing and account takeover. And then defenders figured out how to solve for that, right? We used techniques like CAPTCHAs, or we didn't use CAPTCHAs and we got stronger at detection. But now we're in this new world where AI exists. And sometimes, like, I'll tell you what's crazy to me is recently, our team was looking at all these CAPTCHAs on the internet. And for years, I was sort of thinking that the moment these transformers that we have in large language models become more generalized and we can apply them to vision, CAPTCHAs are done, right? I mean, at some point that's going to break. And there are these great reports over the weekend and over the last week that are proving that you can use something like ChatGPT, this sort of off-the-shelf tool, to break 100% of all the CAPTCHAs in the world. And so here's the thing. You can use AI for some pretty amazing things like personal therapeutics, maybe trying to solve and find cures for diseases, discovering new elements in the periodic table. There's going to be some pretty wild things that we discover with AI, and thanks to the fact that we're leveraging machines to help us. At the same time, we're totally going to see AI getting used by adversaries to launch zero-day campaigns, zero-day threats. CAPTCHAs, I believe, fundamentally, as we know it, are dead. I think that is that is not going to work in the new era that we're going to. And so I think there's a bit of truth in that mix, but I always take issue with absolutes. You know what I mean? In terms of, like, when you have people in power sort of saying that this could be the end of things or the beginning of things. I think it's a spectrum. I think what we need to figure out is if the world and if attackers start leveraging AI to break things like CAPTCHAs, well, could we start to leverage AI to do a better job at detecting a malicious user? Or does the internet or do the fundamentals that we've used to underwrite what the internet is today, does that have to go through a big change given what's going on in the world?
So Kunal, just as a lead into that, is FI using AI for some of those things, for the helping do some of those things?
Yeah. So when you break out AI, I think it really is important that artificial intelligence breaks down into three areas: machine learning, deep learning, and natural language processing. We have been investing heavily as a company around machine learning for years. And we built machine learning capabilities for bot. In fact, we as an organization do not use CAPTCHAs for bot traffic. We use machine learning to try and detect those bad bots without having to serve up a CAPTCHA. And there's different approaches that we take there. We are investing and have been investing in deep learning as well. We put out some technology and some products recently to help folks with posture, configuration management. There's capabilities that we envision, like leveraging and building small language models or leveraging small language models plus machine learning to build up and build out AI WAF as an example. Like there's no reason why we can't dream these things and try these things. And I think what's exciting is right now, there's just so much opportunity to leverage all this awesome technology to try and solve these problems. And we're going to have to. We're just going to have to, because the attackers are getting a new tool in their toolkit. And every time we've seen this happen, where attackers get a new tool, the defenders have to change their strategies or expand their toolkit. And leveraging AI on the defensive side, well, that's an expansion of the toolkit. But we may have to look at alternative strategies as well. Maybe the way that the internet works, the open internet as we see it today, maybe the open internet has to become more closed, because when you deal with things like OpenAI and other companies who are scraping the internet, well, that breaks the economic model of the internet. In order to preserve that, does that mean that we need a more closed internet? Does that mean that more of the internet is going to go behind authentication walls or paywalls? It's yet to be seen what that's going to look like. But there's a lot that's going to have to change. And then you think about provenance, you think about rights, digital rights, you think about the software supply chain. This is a really interesting time. I was having this conversation recently with someone, and we were saying that if you're coming out of school right now, this is one of the most interesting times in computing history. If you're coming into this industry, if you're coming into technology, there is no shortage of fun things to work on and do.
So for our listeners, no shortage of fun things to do. There are interesting opportunities and challenges. Kunal, you know very well the CrowdStrike episode of what happened, everything. That was a basic thing. Do you think, and obviously I don't know the competitive posture of it, etc., but do you think that so much of a dependence on single vendor, I mean, that's become a big issue now? Obviously, it's not related to AI, but AI is going to soon get to that point too. Is that a challenge for the industry as we speak?
So we are not competitors with CrowdStrike. I think it was a wake-up call for everybody, and a wake-up call in terms of how we think about two things. One, we place a lot of trust in technology and technology vendors. And oftentimes, and I've seen this behavior before, where executives and companies will buy things because other executives bought that thing. And eventually you see growth in a technology sector or a technology company, but you don't actually go back and check to see how that is fundamentally operating, or you just assume, well, if they were able to do it, this other company was able to do it, I should be able to do it too. So I think there was this big question of trust but verify that wasn't going on, and not just to CrowdStrike, writ large. We've now seen this, and also writ large, we've seen a lot of organizations take a step back and now have bigger questions about resiliency and this idea of, to your point, you go single vendor. Well, if they're in the critical path and something happens to that vendor and that technology, how does that put my customers, how does that put my business at risk? And am I willing to take that risk on? I don't think people really understood when they were buying CrowdStrike or other types of technology that they were going to be in the critical path. I think the assumption was always, well, if something does happen, it's an agent and maybe the agent will stop working, but the underlying operating system should be fine. I think it's a wake-up call for a lot of companies to interrogate, do the trust and verification. I think it's also a wake-up call for companies to revisit the way they think about resiliency. And I've actually surprisingly seen so many conversations from CIOs and CISOs, and this is the number one topic they want to talk about, because their boards are telling them we cannot have that repeat itself, or maybe we weren't impacted, but we need to consider this across the different vendors and technologies we've accepted today.
No, that's a very important point for our listeners. Kunal, you've now taken on past 2 months a Chief AI Officer title. You probably already had it, but it's official. From FI's perspective, building ethical models, you talked about scraping data. Scraping data can have biases, etc. What does FI have in store to kind of make sure that there is a responsible AI or there is ethical? Do you have an ethics board? What do you have? This is again for your peers more so. What can they learn from what standards are you setting yourself?
It's a great question. So the first thing that I did when I got into the role was I reached out to my peers. So you said this at the beginning, and I think it's just so important. None of us have all of the answers. And the best way we learn is from talking to other people. And so the first thing I did was I immediately jumped on a phone call or a series of phone calls with my peers, CTOs, CISOs, other AI officers from different companies. And I asked them, how do you build your programs? How are you scaling your initiatives? And I learned a lot from that process. On one side, there is the ability to go and create things like centers of excellence. So that's the pattern that we see right now, AI centers of excellence, which are basically groups of people who are thinking through within an organization, policy, data management. They think about how we build and train and fine tune models. How do we safeguard those models? How do we go and put an SDK around those things so they can be used and consumed by the various product organizations? We are in the process of doing those things as a company and looking across the different teams, the different leaders in the organization today, pulling those resources together. I mean, we at the beginning of the year, we created an AI data fabric team, and we announced that at the beginning of the year we had a flagship event at the beginning of the year called App World. And at App World, we announced our AI data fabric. And that is a group of, 20, 25 people who are building, training, fine-tuning models. What we ended up doing was working closely with our legal team. We ended up creating a set of policies that govern how we use AI as an organization. And it's everything from how we think about productivity tooling to how we build and train models. And we're pretty rigorous about this stuff, which is we're not just going to go and grab a model from Hugging Face and put it out there. One of my peers was telling me the story of they grabbed some open model from the internet and they tried to put it into one of their products. And fortunately, it never went out to scale, but they built a chatbot that started emitting things like hate speech as an example. And that's what happens when you just sort of let the Wild West run by itself. And I think it's important to get in front of that. So we're building all that governance in. We believe that that's important in an AI center of excellence. Today, it's our AI data fabric. We believe that will expand and grow its capabilities. But I think like everybody else, it's early stages and we're all figuring it out. I don't think anyone has an answer to this that isn't to your point, the 7 hyperscalers or the 7 large companies of the world. I think those ones have it figured out for the most part. But for everybody else, I think if we're just honest, I think we're all figuring it out as we go.
Awesome. I know you have many other engagements. So one actionable item that you can give our listeners, Kunal, with your tremendously vast, varied experiences. Chief AI officers, aspiring chief AI officers.
Okay. So the other day, I was having this conversation with someone, and they told me that within our industry, 18% of IT budgets are allocated to AI right now. 18% of an IT budget is allocated to AI. What's incredible is how many people in a company actually understand how AI works. So my advice to anybody listening and tuning in or watching right now is go learn from first principles how these neural networks, how the transformer model works. I think if you dig into it and you understand from first principles how this thing is actually functioning, what does attention actually mean? Only then, I think, once you've kind of gone through this process of unpacking it and understanding it and connecting the dots, I think you'll have more appreciation about it. But until you actually look at it, it'll always just sort of be this box that you don't really have much visibility into. And I think for those who really want to aspire to be a chief AI officer or do great work in AI, you have to know how this stuff works. And it's amazing because in my conversations, when I talk to AI folks, very few of them actually know how this works. And I think right now, this field requires deep specialization. And I think it's good to be a generalist, but I don't think that being a generalist in this moment of AI is the right thing to do. So for all the listeners, go read some academic papers. And if you don't know what those are, go to YouTube, go watch the very simple versions of people explaining those difficult concepts, build up your knowledge and start there.
Oh, that's fantastic feedback. So learn, go deep before you put 18% of your budget of your company into AI. Kunal, this has been amazing. Thanks so much. Really exciting, from cyber to JPL to BBC. Wow. We need to get you back here again. There were so many other questions. I had lightning round questions for you, but we'll keep that for the next time. Thanks so much for being on the CIO podcast. And for our listeners, really keep listening and keep subscribing to listen to leaders like Kunal.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been awesome. And for everybody tuning in, best of luck in your journeys. And I wish you an amazing adventure.
Thank you.